There it was, Karen's shiny luxury SUV slowly disappearing nose first into the muddy pond on my farm. The wheels spun helplessly, mud bubbling like a cauldron while she stood on the bank shrieking, "Someone do something." I sat in my excavator sipping my morning coffee, watching the scene unfold like a live-action comedy. Now I know what you're thinking. Why in the world would a middle-aged farmer sink an SUV with heavy machinery? Believe me, I never imagined I'd be the guy making an HOA president scream like she was on a sinking ship. But when someone rolls onto your land, treats it like their personal parking lot, and then throws a wine and yoga picnic on your hayfield, well, let's just say patience runs out fast. So buckle up, because this isn't just a story about a car in the mud. It's about neighbors who underestimated a farmer, and how one entitled Karen learned that when you play HOA games on private land, you get farm-style consequences. Before we dive in, drop a comment below with your location and local time. I love seeing where my audience is tuning in from. If you'd asked me a few years back what I thought about HOAs, I would have said, never dealt with one, and I plan to keep it that way. I was born and raised on this farm. My dad worked this land before me, and his dad before him. We grow hay, raise some cattle, keep chickens, and in general mind our own business. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. The kind of life where you wake up with the sunrise, hear the roosters crow, and know exactly where your food comes from. I love the quiet. No city traffic, no neon signs, no boss breathing down my neck. Just me, the land, and the occasional sound of cows mooing when they got impatient for breakfast. Around here, the only rules were the ones nature made: plant in season, fix your fences, keep the well clean. There wasn't a committee that told you what shade of beige your barn should be painted or how many inches your grass was allowed to grow. That was the beauty of it, freedom, and for decades it stayed that way. But then the subdivision came. Developers bought up a big patch of land about a mile from my property line, and within a year it transformed from cornfield to cul-de-sac. They called it Meadowbrook Estates, which was hilarious because there wasn't a single meadow left after they bulldozed everything flat and paved it over. Marketing brochures called it a gated lifestyle community, as if sticking a guard shack at the entrance magically made it safer or classier. And of course, with the subdivision came the HOA. You know the type, a handful of self-important suburban warriors armed with clipboards, bylaws, and the belief that they are the last line of defense between order and chaos. At first, I didn't care. Live and let live, right? They could manicure their lawns into perfect little green carpets and obsess over mailbox heights all they wanted. I figured as long as they stayed on their side, I'd stay on mine. But then came Karen. Technically, her name was Karen Thompson, but she proudly introduced herself as the lifestyle chairwoman of Meadowbrook Estates, which, if you ask me, is the HOA version of a medieval queen. She strutted around in yoga pants that probably cost more than my tractor tires, barking orders like she owned the whole county. I first met her at the local farmer's market. I was selling fresh eggs and homemade honey, and she stopped at my booth, looked at my jars, and wrinkled her nose like she'd just smelled manure. "This is quaint," she said. "But don't you think the presentation could be elevated? People in our community expect certain standards." I almost laughed in her face. "Elevated, lady, these are eggs. They come from chickens. No amount of elevating is going to change that." Still, I played polite. "Folks around here like it fresh and simple," I told her. She smirked. "Well, in Meadowbrook Estates, we value a more refined lifestyle. You should visit sometime. It's like a resort compared to..." Her eyes flicked toward me, toward the mud on my boots, the calluses on my hands. This. That was my first taste of Karen's superiority complex. And trust me, it was only the appetizer. The second encounter came a week later. I was fixing a section of fence when a glossy pamphlet appeared in my mailbox. At first, I thought it was just another ad for roofing or pest control. But no, this was a personalized invitation from Meadowbrook Estates' HOA. It read, "Join our beautification program, optional for now, but we encourage participation to align with our community standards." I actually snorted when I read it. Align with their standards. My land wasn't part of their subdivision. My family had owned it for generations. But Karen had scrawled a handwritten note at the bottom. "Your farm is the first thing visitors see when they turn into Meadowbrook. We'd appreciate your cooperation in raising the aesthetic." Translation: my barn didn't match their Instagram feed. I ignored it, of course. But Karen didn't stop there. A few days later, I found a piece of paper taped to the side of my barn. It looked suspiciously like one of those HOA violation notices. It listed things like unpainted structures, visible from the road, and improper storage of large equipment. I stood there, staring at the paper, flapping in the breeze, trying not to laugh. They had no authority here, but Karen was acting like she could ticket me anyway. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash. But that's when it clicked. Karen didn't see my farm as private property. She saw it as an extension of her resort, and she was determined to civilize it whether I liked it or not. She didn't stop at paper notices either. Soon, HOA folks started wandering dangerously close to my fence line, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes like they were government inspectors. One of them even snapped photos of my cows. When I confronted him, he said, "We're documenting potential nuisances for community review." "Nuisances?" I asked. "Those are cows. They moo. That's what they do." He shrugged, like he was logging evidence in a court case. That night, I sat on my porch sipping a cold beer and shook my head. I thought these people moved to the country for the rustic charm but can't stand the smell of hay. They want the postcard version of rural life minus the actual farm. Karen, of course, was the ringleader. She drove past my property in her oversized SUV almost every day, slowing down just long enough to roll her window down and shout comments. "Have you thought about repainting that barn red would be more aesthetically pleasing? Your hay bales look sloppy from the road. My yoga group would love to practice by your pond. It has potential, you know." Each time I just waved and smiled, though inside I was imagining what my dad would have said. Probably something along the lines of, "Tell her to shove it and mind her own damn business." I tried patience. I really did. I told myself, she'll get bored, she'll move on. But patience only works when the other side has boundaries. And if Karen had one thing, it was a complete lack of them. Because as I'd soon find out, she wasn't just going to nag me. She was about to start crossing into my world, literally. And once that line got crossed, there was no going back. If Karen had left it at passive-aggressive comments and tacky flyers, maybe I could have brushed it off. But no, she escalated. She turned what I call a soft invasion into an art form. It started with the fence line. My property is clearly marked, has been since my grandfather's time. Posts sunk deep barbed wire taut surveyor stakes still visible. But one morning I noticed a shiny new no parking sign staked right up against my side of the road, facing traffic, as if to declare authority. It had the HOA's logo on it, a little tree in a circle like some eco-friendly cult. I pulled the sign out and tossed it onto the ditch. A day later there was another one, then two. Pretty soon I realized Karen had organized a full-on beautification crew stomping around like missionaries, planting flags for the glory of Meadowbrook Estates. When I caught them in the act clipboard, and all I asked, "What exactly do you think you're doing?" the woman in charge sniffed and said, "We're ensuring that overflow parking from your land doesn't disrupt the aesthetic harmony of Meadowbrook." I nearly choked laughing. "Overflow parking, lady, this is a cow pasture, not a strip mall." She looked offended like I'd just spit in her organic kale smoothie. "We have received multiple complaints that vehicles are visible near your property and it lowers our curb appeal. Those vehicles, my tractors, parked on my own damn farm." But they weren't done. The next week, Karen herself marched right up to my barn with a rolled-up stack of glossy brochures. She didn't even bother knocking, just taped them to the door like she was delivering divine commandments. When I peeled them off, I found pages outlining their community fence color standards, complete with swatches of beige taupe and something called eggshell serenity. Attached was a note in Karen's flowery handwriting. "We recommend repainting your fence to one of these shades to better align with the Meadowbrook vision. Your current wood tone is quite rustic, not in a good way." I stared at the note dumbfounded. Rustic, not in a good way. That fence had been built by my father's own hands. Every nail, every plank had a story. But to Karen it was just an eyesore, another blemish on her HOA's imaginary Instagram grid. I wanted to slam the door on her next time she showed up. Instead, I tried civility. I walked across the property line one afternoon where Karen and a few HOA big shots were sipping wine on her back patio. "Afternoon," I said. "Listen about those notices. My farm isn't under your HOA. You can stop leaving papers on my barn." Karen gave me a tight smile, the kind that makes your skin crawl. "I understand your perspective, but technically your land borders the community. First impressions matter. When guests arrive, the first thing they see is your operation. We're simply trying to bring everything up to standard." "Operation," I repeated. "This is a farm, Karen. The standard is mud manure and hard work." She waved her hand dismissively like I was a child who didn't understand the rules of the game. "Progress is inevitable. You'll thank us later." Progress. That was her favorite word. She used it like a weapon. But things really crossed the line the day I found HOA people inside my pasture. Two of them wearing polo shirts with Meadowbrook's logo were walking around with clipboards jotting notes. My cows were staring at them like they'd just seen aliens land. I stormed over. "What the hell are you doing in here?" One of them looked up casually, documenting potential nuisances for community review. I blinked. "Nuisances, you're trespassing on my land," he pointed at the cows. "Livestock odor. Noise. Possible contamination of water runoff into Meadowbrook drainage." I nearly lost it. "They're cows, they moo, they poop, that's not a nuisance, that's biology." They scribbled something and walked off like I wasn't even there. That night, sitting on my porch with a beer, I mulled it over. They weren't just nagging anymore, they were testing boundaries. Step by step, clipboard by clipboard, they were trying to fold my farm into their little empire. They didn't have legal authority, but they had something just as dangerous: arrogance mixed with persistence. And at the center of it all, Karen, she was relentless. Almost every morning she'd drive her oversized SUV past my place, roll down the window, and lob a fresh insult. "Barn's still unpainted, I see. Ever thought about a community garden instead of hay? My yoga group would love to use your pond for meditation. You really should open it up, it's wasted potential otherwise." I waved, smiled, and bit my tongue. But inside, the pressure was building. I could feel the dam cracking. My dad always said patience was a farmer's strongest tool. But he also said there comes a time when you put your boot down. I just didn't know yet that Karen's soft invasion was about to turn into a full-on land grab. And once her shiny SUV entered my world physically, not just metaphorically, there would be no more laughing it off. That SUV was going to become the straw that broke the clipboard's back. I thought I'd seen it all. Flyers on my barn, HOA foot soldiers, with clipboards in my pasture, even brochures telling me what shade of beige my fence should be. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no, she was just warming up. Because one morning I woke up, looked out the window, and there it was, her shiny black SUV parked smack in the middle of my hay road like it had sprouted overnight. At first I thought maybe she'd broken down. Maybe some mechanical failure had forced her to coast onto my land. But when I walked up to the thing, there was no emergency. No hood popped, no hazard lights. Just Karen sitting in the driver's seat with her sunglasses on, scrolling her phone like she owned the place. I tapped on her window. "Morning, Karen. You know this is my land, right?" She rolled the glass down just enough to smirk at me. "Technically, it's unused land, and I needed parking. HOA streets don't allow overnight vehicles, and your farm road is just sitting here." I blinked. "Just sitting here. That's my hay access. My tractor runs this road every day." She shrugged. "Tractors can go around." I had to stop myself from laughing. Go around, through the fence, over the pasture. This wasn't a Target parking lot. You don't just go around on a farm. "Karen," I said slowly, like I was explaining fractions to a kid, "you can't leave your SUV here. This isn't community property. This is my driveway." She leaned back in her seat all smug. "Correction, it's rural access land. And under municipal code, rural access can be shared for community purposes, which means I'm within my rights." I stared at her. "Rural access land, lady, that's not even a thing." "Look it up," she said, and rolled her window up. I could feel my blood pressure spiking. But I also couldn't stop laughing at the absurdity. She'd just invented a law on the spot, like kids inventing rules in backyard tag. "Oh, by the way, if you touch base, you're immune." Except this time it involved a $70 000 SUV parked on my property. I gave her a final warning. "Move it, or I'll move it for you." She didn't even glance up from her phone. "Go ahead. You'll be hearing from our lawyers." Now you'd think she'd drive off after making her little power move. But no, she left the SUV there. Overnight. For 3 days straight. Blocking my equipment, muddying up the road, daring me to do something about it. By day 2, she was bragging to her HOA cronies about her new parking solution. They came by to gawk like tourists at a roadside attraction. Some of them even posed next to her SUV, snapping selfies with my pasture in the background. "This spot is perfect," one of them said. "It makes Meadowbrook look bigger, almost like we've expanded. Expanded." That word stung. This wasn't an expansion, it was trespass dressed up as entitlement. On the third evening, I caught Karen giving a tour to a new couple moving into the subdivision. She waved dramatically at her SUV and the stretch of my road. And over here she announced, "We've got overflow parking thanks to some underutilized rural land." That's when I lost it. I marched right up, dirt on my boots, grease on my hands, and said loud enough for her new recruits to hear, "This isn't overflow parking. This is private property. You're trespassing. Get your car out of here now." Karen gave me her best HOA queen smile. "Oh, come now. Don't be so territorial. Sharing builds community spirit." "Spirit," I barked. "Lady, this is a farm, not a spirit retreat." You don't share someone's land without asking. That's called theft. Her smile didn't budge. If you don't like it, file a complaint with the HOA. The couple looked awkward, mumbling something about maybe we should go before hurrying off. Karen, meanwhile, stayed planted like she'd scored a victory. That night, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, staring at that SUV glinting in the moonlight like a monument to arrogance. And I thought, all right, enough's enough. Because here's the thing about farms. We're patient, sure. We deal with droughts, storms, and sick calves. But patience doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes patience just means we're waiting for the perfect moment to teach a lesson. And the lesson I was cooking up, it was going to be memorable. I walked past the SUV, gave it a long look, and whispered to myself, "You picked the wrong pasture, Karen." The truth was, her little stunt had given me an idea. A wicked, hilarious farm-style idea. Because if Karen wanted to make my land her parking lot, then maybe I'd give her a parking spot she'd never forget. One with water, one with mud. One that came with a one-way ticket straight down. But first I needed to prepare the ground. Literally. If the SUV had been the straw on the camel's back, what came next was the entire hay bale. Because Karen didn't stop at parking her car on my land. No, she decided my farm was ripe for development. It began with whispers. I overheard HOA folks talking at the feed store, something about expanding recreational opportunities and integrating rustic charm into Meadowbrook lifestyle. At first I thought they were pitching some new HOA rule about decorative birdhouses, but no, they were talking about my property. By Saturday, the whispers had turned into a full-blown invasion. I stepped out of my farmhouse, coffee in hand, and nearly dropped the mug. Right there by my pond was a tent, a big white event tent, and under it, tables covered in pastel tablecloths, pitchers of mimosa, and an entire spread of quiches and avocado toast. Karen was at the center, of course, wearing a floppy sun hat and holding a glass of Chardonnay at 10 in the morning. "Welcome to Meadowbrook's first farm-to-table brunch," she announced like she was Martha Stewart. "Isn't this setting just divine?" I stomped down the hill trying to keep my cool. "What the hell is this?" She turned, smile as wide as the county fair. "Oh, good morning. We decided to host a community event. Your pond makes the perfect backdrop. Very bucolic." "Bucolic," I repeated. "This is my land. You didn't ask. You didn't even tell me." Karen waved her hand as if brushing off a pesky mosquito. "Don't be so dramatic. We're raising awareness for sustainable living. We're honoring your heritage." I glanced around. A group of yoga enthusiasts had rolled out mats right on my hayfield. One woman was doing downward dog while a rooster strutted around pecking at her ponytail. Another guy tried meditating by the pond only to yelp when one of my ducks nipped his ankle. "Heritage," I said, pointing at the chaos. "My chickens are attacking your yoga class, Karen." She didn't miss a beat. Authenticity adds charm. Meanwhile, my cattle were lined up at the fence, mooing at the crowd like they were waiting for a halftime show. Someone from the HOA was snapping photos, probably for their next brochure. "Experience rustic luxury at Meadowbrook." I pinched the bridge of my nose. This couldn't be real. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "pack it up. Now, this isn't a park. It's private property." She took a slow sip of her wine. "Oh, come now. We're improving your land. You should thank us." "Thank them for trampling my pasture, spilling mimosa on my soil, and letting my ducks terrorize their Pilates circle." One of her buddies piped up, "With just a little landscaping, this could be a beautiful venue. Imagine weddings, picnics, HOA, retreats." "Yeah," I shot back, "and imagine me suing the lot of you for trespassing." That shut a few mouths, but not Karen's. She leaned closer, lowering her voice, but not her arrogance. "You don't understand. Change is coming whether you like it or not. If you don't adapt, the city will rezone this land. You'll be boxed in by Meadowbrook. Best to cooperate now before it gets messy." There it was, the threat. She wasn't just stealing brunch space. She was trying to scare me into surrendering my farm piece by piece. I stared at her, then at her SUV still gleaming up the hill, parked proudly like a crown jewel of defiance. Something inside me snapped. "You want messy?" I said. "Keep your car here and I'll show you messy." Karen laughed like I'd just told a dad joke. "Oh please, what are you gonna do, throw hay at it?" But deep down she didn't know me. She didn't know farmers don't bluff. We plan, quietly, patiently. Then we strike when the timing's right. That night, after they packed up their quiches and retreated to their gated bubble, I walked down to the pond. The moon was full, reflecting off the water like a spotlight. I could see tire marks leading right up to the edge where Karen liked to show off the view. And that's when the idea truly took root. I didn't need lawsuits. I didn't need screaming matches. What I needed was gravity mud and one trusty machine, my excavator. I patted the metal arm of the old beast, sitting in my equipment shed. "Time to earn your keep, buddy," I whispered. The plan was simple: loosen the soil just right. Make the ground look solid but soft underneath. Encourage nature to do what it does best. When arrogance outweighs common sense, swallow it whole. The thought of Karen's SUV sinking nose first into my pond almost made me laugh out loud, not out of cruelty but out of poetic justice. She wanted to treat my farm like her HOA playground. Fine, let's play. Of course I wasn't reckless. I made sure no animals were near. I plotted the angles. I worked the excavator carefully, rolling dirt-smoothing tracks until the ground looked deceptively harmless. By morning you'd never know the difference. But I did. And soon so would Karen. Because one thing about farms people forget, the land remembers. Mistreat it and it pushes back. And come sunrise, Karen's precious SUV was going to meet the most memorable parking spot of its life. The Monday after that brunch fiasco, I knew the storm was coming. Karen never let a grudge sit idle. She polished it, paraded it, and turned it into a committee agenda. Sure enough, by mid-morning, a little convoy of HOA vehicles rolled up to the edge of my farm road. 3 SUVs, a golf cart with security stenciled on the side, and half a dozen clipboard warriors marching like they were invading Normandy. At the front naturally was Karen. She was dressed for battle, or at least the suburban version of it. Bright orange blazer, oversized sunglasses, and a megaphone she clearly bought just for the occasion. I leaned against my tractor sipping coffee, watching them like I was at a free circus. Karen lifted her megaphone. "Attention, farmer, farmer." Not my name, not even a sir. Just farmer like I was, some NPC in her HOA video game. "This encroachment cannot continue," she boomed. "Your use of land is disruptive to our community. Your animals are noisy. Your structures are unsightly. Your unregulated pond is a safety hazard." Effective immediately, Meadowbrook Estates claims authority over this shared environment. Her followers clapped like she'd delivered the Gettysburg Address. I set down my mug. "Karen, let me get this straight. You just declared authority over my farm." "That's correct," she said proudly, based on what she held up a folder. "We have documentation." One of her cronies opened it. Inside were printed Google Maps screenshots with red Sharpie circles drawn around my property. Not official surveys, not deeds, just doodles. I had to laugh. "You drew on a map, Karen. That's your documentation." Her face tightened, but she pressed on. "We have also filed a petition with the county zoning office. We are prepared to argue that this land is essential to community expansion." I raised an eyebrow. "And until then," she crossed her arms. "Until then, we will enforce community standards." With that, she gestured to her posse. They marched toward my barn, slapping bright orange notices onto the doors, the fence posts, even one poor cow's feed trough. The notices read things like violation unkempt, appearance, and violation improper vehicle storage. I followed them, snatching papers off as fast as they taped them. "This is trespassing," I barked. Karen smirked. "It's called community enforcement." I leaned in close, just enough for her to hear. "No, Karen, it's called digging your own grave." Her smile faltered for the first time, but she wasn't done posturing. As her team retreated, she shouted for all to hear, "If that vehicle," she pointed dramatically at my excavator, "so much as touches my car, you'll be sued into bankruptcy." The clipboard crew cheered. The golf cart security guy revved his engine like he was about to chase cattle. I raised my hands theatrically. "Oh, don't worry. Wouldn't want to scratch your precious SUV. I'll keep it safe. Very, very safe." The way I said it must have rattled her, because she gave me one last glare and stormed off, convoy in tow. But her SUV, that she left parked proudly on my hayroad like a flag planted in conquered territory. That night, sitting on my porch, I couldn't shake the absurdity. They thought paper notices and Sharpie maps gave them power here. They thought their HOA bylaws trumped generations of blood, sweat, and dirt poured into this land. They thought I was just a farmer they could intimidate into rolling over. But they forgot one thing. Farmers aren't pushovers. We deal with droughts, disease, predators, and storms. We adapt. We endure. And when someone trespasses long enough, we fight back with the tools we know best. I walked down to the excavator, ran my hand along its steel frame, and whispered, "Tomorrow, buddy. Tomorrow we show them what real enforcement looks like." Because the stage was set, the ground was prepared. Karen had dared me in front of her entire HOA army, and I was done playing defense. The next time they showed up, and they would, I was going to give them a show they'd never forget. Not a lawsuit, not a yelling match, something better, something permanent. something involving gravity, hydraulics, and about 20 tons of iron. And believe me, when that bucket arm started moving, no clipboard in the world was going to stop it. After the HOA parade left my driveway, I didn't sleep much that night. The air was heavy thick, with the kind of silence that only comes when trouble is brewing. My farm had endured storms, coyotes, and a barn fire once back in '98, but never in my life did I think the biggest threat would come in the form of a woman with a megaphone and a stack of Sharpie-marked Google Maps. But here we were. Karen's SUV sat gleaming under the moonlight, bold as brass, parked like a monument to arrogance right on my hay road. Every time I looked at it, I could almost hear it mocking me. "What are you going to do, farmer? Complain to the HOA?" That's when the idea hit me. Not like a lightning bolt, but like a slow, delicious grin spreading across my face. You see, my pond isn't just a pond. It's an old farm reservoir dug deep decades ago to store water during dry summers. Over the years, silt and clay made the banks tricky. To the untrained eye, the edge looks solid, grassy even. But step too close and the ground turns soft, the kind of muck that'll suck your boots off if you're not careful. I knew every inch of that pond. Karen didn't. So I hatched a plan. Simple, clean, poetic. If Karen wanted to use my farm as her personal parking lot, then she could enjoy my special VIP parking space by the pond. First, I did a little prep work. I climbed into my excavator, my old iron warhorse, and rumbled it down to the water's edge. The bucket arm groaned, the hydraulics hissing like a beast waking up after a long nap. Slowly, methodically, I loosened the soil near the spot where she loved to park for the view. I churned it, rolled it, made it look level but soft underneath. By dawn it was perfect, a trap hidden in plain sight. The next morning, as if on cue, Karen strutted onto my property like she owned the deed. She waved at me as though we were neighbors sharing pleasantries, not combatants in a low-key property war. "Lovely day, isn't it?" she chirped. I nodded, biting back a laugh. "Sure, Island, perfect for parking." She didn't catch the sarcasm. Of course she didn't. Karen never listened to what she didn't want to hear. She climbed into her SUV and drove it right toward the pond. Tires crunched on gravel, then onto the grassy bank. She cut the engine and stepped out, sunglasses gleaming. "Much better view here," she announced to her HOA entourage, who had followed like ducklings behind their queen. "This land has potential. Can't you just see weddings here, sunrise, yoga retreats, outdoor concerts?" One of them nodded eagerly. "Yes, imagine a gazebo right on the water." Meanwhile, I imagined her SUV sinking slowly, bubbles rising around it like a scene from a B movie. I kept a straight face. Patience, I reminded myself. Farmers know patience better than anyone. But I wasn't just going to wait for gravity to do the work. No, I wanted insurance. So while Karen blabbered about community synergy, I fired up the excavator again. Its diesel engine roared across the field, turning heads instantly. Karen scoffed. "Really, that toy again? You think you can intimidate us with farm equipment?" I leaned out of the cab, grinning. "Not intimidate, facilitate." I lowered the bucket and began nudging at the dirt just behind her SUV. Each scoop made the ground looser, wetter, softer. The HOA crowd shifted uneasily, whispering among themselves. Karen, of course, doubled down. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You're creating unsafe conditions." I shrugged. "Unsafe looks fine to me, but you might want to check your tires." Right on cue, the back end of her SUV sagged a little, sinking just an inch. To me, it was a beautiful sight, like the first crack of dawn after a long night. To Karen, it was pure panic. She ran to the car, yanking on the door handle, trying to start it up. The engine roared, wheels spun, mud sprayed, but the vehicle barely moved. The ground had her now, and it wasn't letting go. The HOA crew gasped. One guy dropped his clipboard straight into the muck. Another woman screamed, "Do something." I tapped the side of my excavator, as calm as Sunday morning. "Don't worry, I am." With a steady hand, I lowered the bucket behind the SUV and gave it one gentle push. Not hard, just enough encouragement, like helping a pig find its way back into the pen. The tires slipped, the earth crumbled, and slowly, so slowly, it was almost theatrical, the SUV tilted forward, nose dipping toward the pond. The crowd shrieked. Karen screamed, "Bloody murder." "No, stop, that's my car." Her precious luxury beast slid another few feet, mud swallowing the wheels, water lapping at the bumper. I sipped from my thermos, utterly unbothered. "Looks like it found the valet spot." She turned to me, furious. Desperate. "You'll pay for this, you'll lose everything." I tilted my head. "Funny. That's exactly what your car's doing right now." By the time the sun hit high noon, half the SUV was submerged. The HOA crew was frantic, snapping photos, dialing phones, shouting into the void. But no cops came. No tow truck dared risk the muck. And Karen. She was left standing on the bank mascara running shrieking promises of lawsuits that would never hold water, just like her SUV. And me, I sat in my excavator watching calmly, like a man enjoying the fruits of a good harvest. Because this wasn't just about a car, it was about a line finally drawn, a message finally delivered. You don't mess with a farmer's land, not unless you want to watch your pride sink straight to the bottom. By the time Karen's SUV had its bumper kissing the pond water, it wasn't just me, Karen, and her little posse standing around. Word had spread. Neighbors from outside Meadowbrook Estates, local farmers, even a couple of teenagers on dirt bikes showed up to watch the drama unfold. Out here in the country, entertainment isn't delivered by Netflix. It's served raw, live, and usually free. And this was better than any county fair. Karen was in full meltdown mode. She was pacing along the bank in her sun hat, screeching into her phone. Yes, emergency. My car is sinking into a swamp. No, I'm not exaggerating. It's a swamp. Get a tow truck, get the fire department, get the National Guard if you have to. The dispatcher on the other end must have asked something she didn't like because she snapped. What do you mean private property? I pay HOA dues. Then she slammed the phone shut like it was 2005 and stormed back toward me. This is your fault. She screamed, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You sabotaged the ground. You're going to jail for this. I leaned out of the excavator cab, resting my arms on the steel frame. Jail. For what? Gravity? Pretty sure mud doesn't count as a felony. The crowd chuckled. Even the farmers who usually keep their cards close to the chest were grinning wide. Karen whirled around, pointing at them like a general rallying troops. Don't laugh. This is serious. This is terrorism against the HOA. A rooster from my coop chose that exact moment to crow loudly, strutting right behind her like it was mocking her every word. The teenagers on dirt bikes howled with laughter. Meanwhile, her SUV gave a loud groan as the earth beneath it shifted again. The back wheels spun helplessly, spraying mud onto a few unfortunate clipboard warriors who squealed and stumbled backward. The nose dipped lower headlights, reflecting in the murky water like a pair of drowning eyes. Karen lunged forward, grabbing the door handle. Hold on, baby, mommy's here, she cried, tugging at it as if sheer maternal instinct could pull 5,000 pounds of German engineering out of a bog. The crowd was eating it up. One farmer leaned over to me and whispered, "She's putting on a better show than the rodeo." "Rodeo's cheaper too," I whispered back. The HOA entourage, meanwhile, was splitting in two. Half were frantically dialing phones, desperate to summon reinforcements. The other half were nervously edging away, clearly realizing this was a losing battle. A woman in yoga pants muttered, "Our insurance won't cover this." And another man whispered, "Do you think we could still blame him if it was voluntary parking?" It was like watching rats abandon a sinking ship, except the ship was a luxury SUV with leather seats. Karen noticed their hesitation and snapped, "Don't you dare leave me. This is our fight. This is about property rights, community pride. The farmer is trying to humiliate us." The SUV made her point for her by sinking another 6 inches with a slurping sound that drew gasps from the crowd. The back end bobbed once, then steadied half in, half out like it was deciding whether to accept its fate. I raised my voice just enough to cut through the chaos. "Karen, I warned you. Repeatedly. You parked on my land without permission. You held brunch on my pasture. You taped HOA notices to my barn. This is just the land teaching you a lesson." She spun toward me, wild-eyed. "You think this is funny?" I gestured to the crowd. "They sure do." The laughter erupted again. Someone even started filming their phone, aimed steady at the spectacle. Oh, I knew exactly where that video would end up: viral, shared across town, maybe even across the state. HOA Queen's car sunk by Farmer's Pond had a nice ring to it. Karen must have realized it too, because she tried to regain control. She climbed onto the hood of the SUV, balancing precariously, megaphone in hand. "Listen to me," she wailed. "This man is a menace. He is destroying community harmony. She didn't get to finish because the hood lurched beneath her and she toppled sideways into the mud with a spectacular splash. The roar of laughter that followed could probably be heard 2 towns over. Even I couldn't hold back a grin so wide it hurt my cheeks. Karen emerged, covered head to toe in muck hat, gone sunglasses dangling from one ear. She looked less like an HOA chairwoman and more like a swamp creature dragged out of the bayou. "You'll pay," she sputtered, spitting mud. I tapped the excavator's controls, lowering the bucket slowly, deliberately, until it hovered right above her SUV like the sword of Damocles. The crowd hushed, holding their breath. With one final push, I nudged the back of the car. The ground collapsed beneath it, and the SUV slid gracefully forward, nose-diving into the pond, until only the rear bumper and one taillight were visible above the surface. It was done. Silence hung for a moment. Then the crowd erupted in cheers, hoots, and applause. The farmers clapped each other on the back. The teenagers revved their dirt bikes in celebration. Even the cows let out a few enthusiastic moos, as if nature itself was in on the joke. Karen stood frozen, dripping in mud, staring at the water where her SUV had vanished. For once in her life she was speechless. I leaned out of the cab, calm as ever. "Parking's free," I said. "But retrieval, that'll cost you." The crowd roared again. That was the moment it hit me. I hadn't just won a petty feud. I'd staged a public execution of arrogance, a spectacle so absurd it would live in local legend for years. And Karen, she was finished. You'd think after watching her beloved SUV sink into the pond like the Titanic, Karen might have taken the hint and retreated in shame. But if there's one thing I've learned about people like her, it's this: entitlement doesn't drown easy. Within 15 minutes, Karen had composed herself enough to start barking orders again. Still dripping mud, she stormed over to her entourage, yelling, "Call the police, this is a crime, this is warfare against the HOA." One clipboard warrior dutifully dialed. Another started snapping more photos, trying to capture evidence like he was auditioning for CSI Suburbia. Meanwhile, I sat back down on my porch with another cup of coffee, perfectly calm. Because here's the thing, I knew how this would play out. This wasn't my first rodeo with law enforcement, though. Usually it involved loose cattle, not luxury vehicles. Sure enough, 2 sheriff's cruisers rolled up 20 minutes later, lights flashing. The crowd parted like they were Moses and the Red Sea. Karen ran up, covered in muck, flailing her arms like a woman possessed. "Officers, arrest him. He destroyed my car. He endangered my life. The deputy held up a hand. "Ma'am, slow down. Whose property is this?" Karen blinked. "What, well, technically his, but it's part of our community atmosphere, so ma'am," the deputy repeated. "Is this your land?" "No, but," he turned to me. "Sir, this your farm?" "Yes, sir," I said, handing him a copy of the deed I keep laminated in my truck just for moments like this. "Been in my family 3 generations. The deputy glanced at it, nodded once, and handed it back. Then he looked at Karen. "Ma'am, you parked your vehicle on his land without permission," she sputtered. "It's not trespassing, it's rural access," the second deputy snorted. "That's not a thing." Karen's jaw dropped. "But he dug up the ground, he made it unsafe." I leaned forward. "Unsafe, Sheriff. I warned her 3 times not to park there. She refused. Nature did the rest." The deputy scratched his chin, clearly amused. "Well, ma'am, I don't see a crime here. What I see is trespassing. And if the landowner wants to press charges, he can." The crowd erupted in laughter. Karen's face turned the color of a ripe tomato. "You don't understand," she shrieked. "This man is dangerous. He humiliated me in front of my entire community. He ruined Meadowbrook's image," the deputy shrugged. "Ma'am, Meadowbrook's image ain't my problem. But your insurance might want to hear about this." That's when the second shoe dropped. Karen called her insurance company right there on speakerphone, demanding they cover vehicular sabotage. She rattled off a dramatic story about how I lured her SUV into a swamp like some kind of hillbilly supervillain. The agent listened politely, then asked Mrs. Thompson, was the vehicle parked legally on authorized property. Karen hesitated. "Well, technically no, but it was adjacent." "Then I'm sorry," the agent interrupted. "This claim is denied. Intentionally parking on private farmland is not covered under your policy." The look on Karen's face, priceless. Like someone had just told her, Starbucks discontinued pumpkin spice lattes forever. Her HOA crew started fidgeting. One muttered, "She said it was fine to park there." Another whispered, "Do you think our dues are going to go up because of this?" I nearly spit my coffee. But Karen wasn't done. Oh no. She pivoted to her last weapon, the HOA legal hammer. "We'll sue," she declared, pointing at me like a witch hunter in Salem. "We'll drag you through court until you beg for mercy." I stood up, walked calmly into my house, and came back with a thick folder. Inside were documents my father had kept, and I had updated the official land survey conservation easement papers and a notarized statement of boundaries. I spread them out on the hood of the sheriff's cruiser. "See this, my land. See this stamp, agricultural preserve. See this clause, any unauthorized development, interference, or use of this land without owner consent can trigger fines up to $50,000 per violation payable by the encroaching party." The deputies whistled. The HOA folks paled. Karen's eyes widened in horror. "You mean, if we tried to rezone?" One of them stammered. "You'd bankrupt your own HOA before you even got started," I finished. The silence that followed was sweeter than honey fresh from the comb. Karen, still covered in mud, tried one last desperate line. "You can't humiliate me like this." I'll report you to the city council," one deputy chuckled. "Ma'am, the city council's not going to save you from sinking your own car." And that was it. The fight drained out of her like water leaking from a bucket. She stood there trembling, hair-matted clothes ruined her once proud SUV, gurgling under the pond like a tombstone to arrogance. The HOA dispersed quietly, their clipboards hanging low, their bravado gone. Some wouldn't even look me in the eye. Others muttered apologies under their breath. By sundown, it was just me, the pond-and-a-half submerged SUV sticking out like the world's most expensive lawn ornament. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast to the setting Sunday. To boundaries I muttered, "May they always hold," and in that moment I knew the battle was won. The morning after the great sinking, my farm felt unusually quiet. No HOA caravans, no clipboards rustling in the wind, no megaphone booming. Attention farmer, just the gentle sound of cows chewing cud and ducks splashing around the pond. And of course, the faint metallic outline of a luxury SUV half submerged like some modern art exhibit. I couldn't resist. I brewed a pot of coffee, pulled up a lawn chair by the pond, and sat there like a man admiring his new fountain. A couple of neighbors wandered by curious. One snapped a photo muttering, "That's going viral." Another said, "Gotta admit it really ties the landscape together." By noon the video was already online. One of the teenagers with a dirt bike had uploaded the whole thing, Karen shrieking the excavator, pushing the SUV, sliding into its watery grave. The title, HOA Karen Gets Sunk, literally. Within hours it had tens of thousands of views. By evening, the memes were everywhere. Karen's face photoshopped onto the Titanic captions, like "Parking included with the view and community standards meet farm standards." Meanwhile, Meadowbrook Estates was in chaos. The HOA board scrambled to distance themselves from Karen, issuing a half-hearted statement about unfortunate misunderstandings and isolated incidents. But the damage was done. The town laughed, the county laughed, and even the sheriff's department couldn't stop chuckling about it. Karen, however, wasn't laughing. She vanished from public eye for a few days. Rumor had it she was trying to negotiate with her insurance company, threatening lawsuits and demanding the HOA cover her losses. But word also got out that she'd racked up thousands in fines for trespassing and would be personally liable for any cleanup or towing. The kicker, the towing company, quoted her a bill so outrageous that it nearly matched the value of the car. Apparently they charge extra when the vehicle is 3 feet underwater. I thought that was the end of it. That is until a letter arrived in my mailbox, a thick envelope with an official-looking seal. For a second I braced myself for another HOA stunt. But no, this was from the State Conservation Office. I opened it, skimmed the pages, and nearly burst out laughing. See, my father had done something smart decades ago. He'd placed part of our land, including the pond, under a conservation trust. It was technically classified as federally protected wetlands. That meant any unauthorized use, development, or interference wasn't just trespassing, it could trigger federal penalties. I could almost picture Karen's face when she found out. Here she was parading around about community expansion, when in reality, her little stunt could have slapped her HOA with fines bigger than their annual budget. $50,000 per violation, multiplied by every tent stake, every brunch table, every yoga mat they'd plopped down on my property. I sat back, savoring the irony. Not only had her car sunk, but her entire HOA empire had nearly sunk with it. A week later, I got the cherry on top. A production company reached out after seeing the viral video. They wanted to license the footage for a reality TV pilot called Farm vs. HOA. They offered me a tidy check just to appear in the trailer. Suddenly my pond wasn't just a pond anymore, it was a set piece, a legend, a symbol of rural revenge. Karen, meanwhile, quietly moved out of Meadowbrook. Some said she went to live with her sister in another state. Others claimed she was still trying to sue someone, anyone, but couldn't find a lawyer brave enough to touch the case. The SUV was eventually hauled out of the pond, stripped for parts, and sold off like a carcass. Last I heard, the bumper ended up hanging on a bar wall as a trophy. As for me, life went back to normal. Cows, mooed chickens, clucked hay, got baled. Except now, when people drove by, they slowed down to gawk at the infamous pond. Some even stopped to take selfies. I didn't mind. Let the world remember. One evening sitting on the porch, I thought about it all, the battles, the absurdity, the sheer stubbornness of it, and I realized something. I hadn't just sunk her car. I'd sunk the illusion that her rules applied everywhere. I'd sunk the arrogance of people who think property lines don't matter. And I'd sunk the belief that a farmer is just some pushover in muddy boots. Karen came here to teach me about community standards. But in the end, it was the land itself that taught her the final lesson. respect boundaries, or the earth will swallow your pride whole. I raised my glass toward the pond where ripples shimmered in the fading light. Rest in pieces, I said softly. Then I chuckled. Best parking spot you'll ever get. Looking back, I realized this story was never really about an SUV or even about Karen. It was about boundaries, those invisible lines that keep our lives, our families, and our peace of mind intact. My land wasn't just dirt and fences. It was the legacy of my father and his father before him. And when someone disrespected that, they weren't just stepping on soil, they were stepping on everything my family built. Here's the truth in life. People will always test your limits. Some will push a little, others will barge right through. If you stay silent, they'll take more. But the moment you stand your ground, you send a message, not just to them, but to yourself, that your voice matters and your space deserves respect. I didn't sink that SUV out of spite. I did it because enough was enough. And sometimes standing up for yourself isn't loud or violent, it's creative, patient, and unforgettable. So wherever you are, remember this: protect your peace, respect your own boundaries, and never let anyone, HOA or otherwise, convince you that your worth depends on their standards. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a neighbor or an HOA push your boundaries? Drop your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this wild ride, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next tale. Trust me, there are plenty more HOA nightmares to come.